My cousin forged my signature to sell my grandmother's house. I found out about the sale from a voicemail. It was from a real estate agent named Marissa, asking if I had any questions now that the closing was complete. I thought it was a scam call at first. I deleted the message, then undeleted it, then listened to it again. Hi, this is Marissa from Redwood Realty. I just wanted to say congratulations on the sale, and if there's anything you need regarding tax documentation or follow up on the buyer side, feel free to reach out. That was on a Wednesday. I called her the next morning while parked outside my job. I was half laughing when I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. She was quiet for a second, and then asked if I was Juliana Reyes. I said yes. She asked if I was related to Maria Reyes. I said yes again, my grandmother. She apologized and said she wasn't sure how I didn't know, but the house had already closed. She said the seller, paperwork had been signed by me, as co-owner. I told her I wasn't a co-owner. That's when I pulled over and stayed parked for another hour. The house was on Merritt Avenue in Vallejo. My grandmother had lived there since 1989. She'd passed away 2 years ago, during the winter, after a fall in the kitchen. I was there when the ambulance came. We'd been rotating shifts, me, my cousin Teresa, and a nurse. After she passed, we didn't do anything with the house. She'd left a trust, but not a very detailed one. Probate started, then stopped, then got picked up again last year. The house wasn't in my name. As far as I knew, it was still in limbo. I called my cousin Teresa next. No answer. I texted her and asked, "Did you sell Grandma's house?" Nothing. I waited an hour, then drove straight to Merritt Avenue. The first thing I noticed was the lockbox on the front door. There was a white SUV parked in the driveway, and 2 people were bringing in boxes. One of them was a kid, maybe 10 or 11. I just stood there across the street for a few seconds. It didn't look like a move out. It looked like a move in. I walked up and rang the doorbell. A woman answered. She looked surprised, but not defensive. I asked if she'd just bought the house. She said yes, just last week. She asked if I was from the HOA, and I told her no, that I was Maria Reyes' granddaughter, and hadn't known the house was for sale. She said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we didn't mean to cause any trouble." She told me they'd bought it through a conventional sale, that everything seemed legit, and that she hoped there wasn't some kind of mistake. I told her I didn't think it was her fault. When I got back in the car, I called Marissa again. She sounded nervous this time. She said everything had been handled through a lawyer named Greg Harlan. I asked for his number, and she gave it to me. I called him next, and he picked up right away. He seemed more annoyed than anything else, like I was bothering him. I asked him to explain how a house got sold with my signature on the documents when I hadn't signed anything. He said, "Ms. Reyes, the documents we received had your signature notarized, and as far as I know, everything was properly filed. If there's a dispute, you'll need to file with the county recorder's office." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never even seen the documents. That night, I went through my email and found nothing. I checked my mail pile. Nothing from any title company or law office. The only person who would have had access to the paperwork was Teresa. She was the one who said she'd take care of the estate stuff. I hadn't wanted to deal with it. I was the only other grandchild, and it had felt fair at the time. At around 11:40 p.m., she finally texted back. It just said, "Can we talk tomorrow?" I didn't respond to Teresa's text until the next morning. I waited until I'd had some coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and forced myself not to say anything I couldn't take back. I typed, "We need to talk today. Call me before noon." She wrote back right away and said she'd call at 10. She ended up calling at 10:36. Her voice was calm, a little too casual. She started with, "Hey," like nothing was wrong. I didn't bother with small talk. I asked her straight out, "Did you sign my name on the sale documents?" She paused. "I needed to," she said. "It was the only way to get it done." I just sat there. I didn't say anything. She kept talking. "The estate stuff was stalled for months and nobody was doing anything. I tried to loop you in, Jules, I really did. But every time I called, you were too busy." "That doesn't give you the right to sign my name," I said. She didn't argue. She said, "I know. I'm not saying it was right. I just didn't want to keep paying out of pocket. The taxes were overdue, and the pipes in the basement burst last fall. I already covered that and the lawn and the cleanup crew. I couldn't keep fronting money for a house we weren't going to keep." It was the first time I realized how much she'd been doing behind the scenes, but it didn't change what she'd done. "So you forged my signature?" I asked again. "I filled in the paperwork," she said. "Yes, I signed it because it was faster than dragging this on for another 6 months." I asked how she even had access. She said she worked with a title company her friend recommended. They didn't ask many questions, and her lawyer, Greg Harlan, told her it would be fine as long as no one contested it. "So you knew it was fraud?" I knew it wasn't perfect. I hung up. I didn't answer when she called back. I didn't pick up the next day either. I kept thinking about how many people must have seen that paperwork. A notary, the lawyer, the title company. No one flagged it. No one questioned it. My name was just a box to check. And once it was there, no one cared who actually put it down. I spent most of that weekend on the phone. County clerk, probate office, a legal aid clinic in Oakland. One of the paralegals explained that if my signature had been forged and used to complete a real estate transaction, it was a serious offense. But reversing the sale wouldn't be simple. The house had already transferred to the new buyer. The woman I spoke to on Merritt Avenue wasn't some scammer. She was just a mom with a kid, probably thinking this was her forever home. If I wanted to contest the sale, I'd have to file a report, potentially press charges, and bring it into civil court. And that would take months, maybe more. I still had my copy of Grandma's trust, at least the latest one we found in her safe. It named both me and Teresa as equal beneficiaries. But the title to the house had never been properly updated. It was one of those things Grandma meant to fix but didn't. Everything was vague. All of this had fallen into a gray area. On Sunday night, Teresa texted again. "I'll give you your half." No apology. Just that. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know what half meant. The house sold for $412,000 according to public records. Even after fees and taxes, that should have left over $350K. If she was offering half, that would mean somewhere around $175,000. But the way she'd worded it felt like a bribe. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept remembering little things, like the time Teresa and I cleaned out the garage together after Grandma died. She'd cried while folding up an old Afghan and said she didn't want anything from the house. She said the memories were enough. I'd believed her. Now I wasn't sure I knew her at all. Monday morning I got a cashier's check in the mail. It was from Teresa. It was made out to me for $90,000. I stared at the check for a long time before touching it. It came in a plain envelope with no note, no return address, just my name and the amount. $90,000. Not even close to half. Not if the sale had gone through for what the record showed. I didn't cash it. I didn't tear it up either. I just left it on my desk, beside my laptop, and kept walking past it like it wasn't there. I told myself I'd deal with it later. Maybe talk to a lawyer. Maybe call Teresa and ask her to explain herself. But I didn't. Not right away. Instead, I drove back to Merritt Avenue. The new owners weren't home this time. The curtains were drawn, the SUV gone. I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the porch light fixture I remembered helping my grandma pick out at Lowe's. The sun was going down, and everything looked slightly unfamiliar, like the new family had managed to erase little parts of her already. Fresh paint on the trim, a new mailbox, a blue ceramic welcome sign where her old iron one used to hang. It didn't feel like my place anymore, but it also didn't feel like theirs. It felt like something stolen and dressed up. I got back in my car and called the county recorder's office again. I asked if I could get copies of all documents related to the house sale, especially the seller's declaration. They said I could come in or request them by mail. I went in person. The woman behind the counter printed them for me without much trouble. I held the stack in my hands, thick and stapled in the corner. And there it was, my name, my signature. Perfectly neat, curved the way I used to write it back in high school before I switched to block letters. It was the old version of my signature, the kind I hadn't used in at least 6 years. That's what made it clear. It was a copy of a signature she'd taken from somewhere else. Something old, a bank card maybe, or a medical release form. Teresa had a stack of my documents when we were caring for Grandma. Photocopies of IDs, old notary forms. She'd probably just picked one and traced it. Went to a lawyer the next day. I found him through a friend of a friend, Evan Mendoza, a probate and estate attorney in Walnut Creek. His office was small but clean, and he didn't act surprised when I told him why I was there. After I finished explaining everything, he asked, "Do you want to get the house back, or do you want to go after her?" I said, "I don't know yet." He nodded like he'd heard it before. "If you press this, it's going to be messy. You'll have to file a fraud claim, and that could drag both of you into litigation. Best case scenario, the court reverses the sale, and the buyers might sue your cousin. Worst case, you spend thousands in legal fees and still get less than what you were owed." I asked him what he'd do. He didn't answer directly. He just said, "The check. Don't cash it yet. If you do, you could be seen as accepting a settlement." I left his office feeling worse than before. That night, Teresa called again. I let it go to a voicemail. Then she texted, "You got the check. It's more than fair." I wrote back, "It's not even close to half. You sold the house for over $400K. She wrote back one word, "Expenses." I waited 5 minutes, then asked, "You forged my signature. You realize that's a felony, right?" This time, no reply. The next day she messaged again, "You're not going to blow this up. It's done. Don't be stupid." That's when it shifted. Up until then, I still thought maybe she'd made a mistake, convinced herself it was all for the best. But that message, that tone, was pure arrogance. Like she thought I wouldn't fight back because I never had before. I forwarded the message to Evan. He texted back, "Let's talk again. That changes things." Evan looked more serious when I walked into his office the second time. He didn't offer coffee or make small talk. He just pointed to the chair across from his desk and asked, "Did you bring the original check?" I handed it over. He slipped it into a folder without opening it. Then he clicked his pen and said, "Here's the deal. That message she sent you. Don't be stupid." It's enough to suggest intent. Combined with the forged signature and the check she sent, it shows she knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated decision. I nodded, feeling my jaw tighten. "So what now?" "I can send a cease and desist today," he said. "That'll force her to stop contacting you directly. Then we draft a demand letter. We give her one last chance to settle the right way, through formal mediation with full accounting. If she refuses, we file. Fraud, civil theft, possibly elder financial abuse depending on how the trust reads. The court may not reverse the sale, but we can go after your share. The full share." He paused. "You need to be ready for this to get ugly." I was. At least I thought I was. The letter went out the next day. Teresa didn't reply, but her lawyer did. A man named Alan Lim, based in Sacramento. Evan forwarded me the email. It was full of formal language, but the bottom line was clear. They weren't admitting fault. They weren't acknowledging any fraud. But they were willing to discuss a revised settlement to avoid litigation. The number they proposed was $115,000. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even tell Evan what I wanted. Instead, I drove to Teresa's house. She lived in a townhouse in Benicia, a few miles from where we grew up. I hadn't been there since Thanksgiving the year Grandma died. The blinds were down. Her car was in the driveway. I rang the bell and waited. She opened the door wearing leggings and a hoodie, no makeup, her hair pulled back. She looked tired. Not guilty, just annoyed. "I'm not supposed to talk to you," she said. "You sent a lawyer." "You forged my name," I said. She sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "I did what I had, too." I wasn't going to let that house rot just because you couldn't make a decision. You didn't even ask me. I asked. You ignored it. I called you 4 times last spring. You never answered. That doesn't mean you get to steal my name. She crossed her arms. You think this is about money, but it's not. I lived in that house more than you did. I cleaned it out. I paid for the repairs. You want to drag this into court? Fine. You'll spend months burning everything down for what? An extra 30 grand? It's not just the money. Oh, please. She gave a dry laugh. It always is. I didn't respond. She didn't invite me in. I turned and walked back to my car. That night, I told Evan I wanted to proceed. No negotiation, no partial settlements. I wanted to see it through. He filed the paperwork 2 days later. We requested a full accounting of the sale, including proceeds, expenses, and disbursements. We submitted copies of the forged signature, the text messages, and the trust. We served her at work, an accounting firm in Vallejo, so she'd have to explain it to her boss. That was the day things escalated. 2 days after the filing, someone slashed my rear tires while I was parked outside my apartment. No note, no camera footage, just 2 clean cuts on both sides and a ruined morning. I couldn't prove it was Teresa or anyone she knew, but it didn't feel random. I reported it anyway. Then I replaced the tires and moved my car to a different street. I didn't tell Evan about it. Not yet. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could scare me. But I also didn't sleep much that week. The full accounting came in on a Thursday. Evan emailed me a scanned copy with a note that said, "Take your time going through this. We'll respond formally." There were pages of itemized deductions, contractor fees, cleanup crews, title costs, closing fees, legal consultations, and properties, management expenses, that totaled more than I'd expected. Teresa had made it look like she'd poured everything she had into that house. But the numbers didn't track. There were vague charges listed under initials I didn't recognize. Consulting, JRH 3,800. Storage rental, 4,600. On-site labor coordination, 11,200. There were 3 separate payments marked as reimbursement TR, each one over 10,000. I called Evan. TR is her, right? Teresa Reyes? He confirmed it. That's her paying herself back. But we'll need documentation to prove those expenses were real. Receipts, invoices, transfer records. So she just made these numbers up? We can't say that yet, he said, but we can demand verification. It was the on-site labor coordination line that stuck with me. I remembered being at the house maybe 5 or 6 times during cleanup. I never saw anyone there besides her, me, and one guy she knew from her church, who helped us move boxes. That was it. There was no crew. Evan sent a response the next day, a formal challenge of the accounting, plus a request for discovery. If Teresa wanted to claim she'd spent more than $100,000 preparing the house for sale, she'd have to prove it. That's when things turned. The following week, Evan got a call from Alan Lim, Teresa's lawyer. He said they were reconsidering the direction of the case and might be open to arbitration. I didn't trust it, but I told Evan to hear them out. Meanwhile, I started getting weird messages on social media. One from a mutual cousin in Fresno. "Hey, not trying to get in the middle, but T said you're suing the family? What's going on?" Another from someone I barely remembered. An old classmate of Teresa's. "Just so you know, people are saying you're trying to shake down your own cousin for money." It felt petty, like a smear campaign. But it worked. People who didn't know anything about the situation suddenly had opinions. A distant aunt posted something vague on Facebook about greedy relatives who can't let go. She didn't tag me, but I knew who it was aimed at. I stayed quiet. Evan told me not to respond, not even to correct the rumors. Anything you say outside the case could be used against you. I hated it. I hated the silence, the cold legal back and forth, the feeling that I was being painted as some bitter, ungrateful niece. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I should have just taken the $90,000. Maybe it really wasn't worth the stress. Maybe Teresa had convinced herself she was entitled to more because she was physically there more often. But then I remembered the check. No explanation, no accounting. Just 90 grand in the mail, and a message telling me not to be stupid. That wasn't a mistake. That was control. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Evan called and said, "You need to see this." He emailed a copy of a notarized document submitted during the sale, Teresa's affidavit of seller authority. It had my name typed under hers as a co-beneficiary, and a signature that was supposed to be mine, but the notary stamp caught my attention. I zoomed in. The signature had been notarized in person in Vallejo, on a date I was out of the state. I remembered clearly because I was at a work retreat in Colorado that whole week. I still had the flight confirmations in my email, plus hotel receipts and photos. I forwarded everything to Evan. He responded almost immediately. "This is it. This is the proof." We had her. She hadn't just forged my name. She'd falsified a notarization, claimed I signed in front of a notary I'd never met, on a day I wasn't even in California. Evan filed a motion to amend the complaint to include fraud under penalty of perjury. Now, it wasn't just a civil dispute. It could trigger a criminal referral. 3 days later, Teresa called me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was shaking. "Juliana, please, don't take it that far. We can fix this. Just call me back." I didn't call her back. The voicemail sat on my phone, untouched, and I kept replaying that one line. "Don't take it that far." As if everything up to that point had been fair, as if she'd drawn the line and I was the one crossing it. Evan moved fast. He submitted the amended complaint along with the supporting documents. My travel records, time-stamped photos, hotel confirmations, and credit card statements showing I was in Denver the same day my signature was supposedly notarized in Vallejo. By then, Teresa's side must have realized how bad it looked. Her lawyer, Alan, sent a follow-up trying to delay the hearing, asking for an extension so they could review new evidence. Evan denied it. He told the judge we were ready to proceed and that every delay was just another attempt to wear me down. He wasn't wrong. That whole month, I felt like I was unraveling in slow motion. I stopped sleeping. I stopped seeing friends. I couldn't even focus at work. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it might be something else. Some new stunt, another quiet threat. Then one morning, someone left a handwritten note under my apartment door. I lived in a locked building. No one could have gotten in without a code. The note said, "You've made your point. Let it go." No name. Just that. I stared at it for almost an hour. I couldn't decide if it was Teresa or someone close to her. I didn't call the police. I didn't have proof. No camera in the hallway. No signature. No fingerprints. Just bad handwriting in blue pen on lined paper. I texted Evan a picture of it. He told me to save it, but not to respond. He said intimidation tactics were common when people knew they were losing ground. Still, I started double-checking my locks at night and carrying pepper spray even just walking to my car. It was the kind of fear that makes you feel stupid for being afraid, but it stuck with me. Meanwhile, the legal part kept moving. Evan filed a motion for expedited discovery. He wanted all bank records tied to the sale, where the funds went, who got what, and how the money was distributed. If we could prove Teresa had pocketed money through fraudulent claims, the court could order full restitution and penalties. And suddenly, her side went quiet. No more emails, no more counteroffers, just silence. Until one Friday afternoon, Evan called me. "They want to settle," he said. "Full amount, $176,500. No deductions, clean transfer." I didn't say anything at first. He went on. "They'll also agree to a signed admission that the signature was not yours, but they want to avoid language that includes criminal liability. It's a full civil settlement. No charges, no formal fraud accusation on record." I asked the question I'd been dreading. "So if I take this, she walks?" He paused. "Legally, yes. She pays the money. The court closes the case. There's no trial." "Would this stop me from reporting her?" "No," he said. "You'd still be free to submit everything to law enforcement, but they'd decide whether to pursue it. Most DAs don't touch forged family real estate cases unless there's a clear victim loss, and with a full settlement, they might see it as handled." I thanked him and hung up. Then I cried. Not from relief, just from the weight of it. I hadn't talked to Teresa in weeks, but I knew the message she was sending. She'd pay me off, clean the record, and go right back to acting like I was the bitter one, the difficult one, the cousin who sued her own family. The next day she emailed me, subject line, "Please, no body text, just an attachment, a letter, PDF format." I opened it. It wasn't an apology. It was a justification. 2 pages of self-pity. She talked about the time and money she'd spent, how tired she'd been, how unfair it was that the house had been left in both our names when she'd done all the work. She said she knew what she did was wrong, but that I had pushed her into a corner by refusing to engage. She ended it with, "If you don't accept this settlement, I'll lose everything." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I forwarded the email to Evan. All I said was, "Let's finish this." The settlement was finalized on a Tuesday afternoon, one of those bright cold days in March where everything outside felt clearer than anything in my head. Evan called just after 3 p.m. to confirm the wire transfer had gone through. I checked my account, and there it was, $176,500 minus legal fees, clean, final, and traceable. "There's nothing more for you to do on the civil side," he said. "You're done." I should have felt some kind of closure, but instead, I just felt suspended, like I'd taken off a heavy backpack, and my body hadn't registered it yet. I asked him, "What about the fraud part? Can I still report it?" He said yes, that the documents we'd gathered, especially the notarization date and travel records, were still valid for criminal referral. "If you want to take it to the district attorney, I'll help you prepare the package," he said. "But it's your call now." I waited 3 days. I didn't want to feel like I was doing it out of spite. I wanted to be sure I was doing it because it was right. Not for revenge, just for the record. On Friday morning, I dropped off the packet at the Solano County District Attorney's office. Evan had organized everything. Timeline, affidavits, the forged documents, my sworn statement, even copies of Teresa's messages, and the note left at my door. I left it at the front desk in a manila envelope with my contact info clipped to the front. They didn't call me that day. Or the next week. What happened instead came through someone else. A friend of mine, Lauren, messaged me on a Saturday night. "Hey," she wrote, "did something happen with Teresa? I saw her name on a real estate Facebook group and people are saying she lost her license." That was the first I'd heard of it. Teresa had been doing bookkeeping for a small real estate firm on the side. Mostly trust accounting, closings, escrow prep. Apparently someone at her office had been contacted by an investigator. I couldn't confirm anything publicly, but I heard more pieces through people who still talked to her, or who didn't know they were talking to me about her. One said she'd been let go. Another said she'd been reported for something serious. Eventually, I got confirmation the state licensing board had been notified of a fraud complaint involving her name and a forged signature. Whether or not the DA pursued charges, that part stuck. She'd wanted to keep everything quiet. Instead, people started talking. Not loudly, not cruelly. But the story spread. She deleted all her social media a few weeks later. Then her number changed. And then, 3 months after the settlement, I ran into her at a grocery store in Concord. It was early evening, and I was in the frozen aisle, holding a bag of edamame. She turned the corner, saw me, and froze. We made eye contact. I didn't move. Neither did she. She looked thinner, tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. She wasn't wearing makeup and her hands were stuffed in her hoodie. She opened her mouth like she might say something, but she didn't. She turned around and walked the other way. Not a word. Oh, that was the first time I felt something like justice. Not because I wanted her humiliated, but because for once, she couldn't rewrite it. She couldn't spin it. There was no way to perform her way out of it. It was just there, in the silence between us. That was her consequence. I didn't expect the weight to stay with me. I thought once the money landed and the case was closed, I'd feel lighter, that I'd get my energy back, sleep better, laugh without that hard edge. But something shifted in me after the grocery store. Not in a dramatic way, just enough to notice. I stopped answering phone calls from family. I let texts sit for days. When my uncle invited me to his retirement dinner, I told him I had a conflict. I didn't. I just didn't want to be in a room where everyone was pretending they didn't know what had happened. Or worse, pretending it didn't matter. The truth was I didn't trust them anymore. Not fully. After everything, no one called me to ask if I was okay. Not even the people who used to text me memes or send happy birthday videos. They all knew what had happened. It had circulated through the family group chats, the way bad news always does. But they treated it like gossip, not betrayal. Even the ones who said nothing, especially them. I didn't want to explain myself or defend why I took legal action, or correct whatever version of the story Teresa had told. So I pulled back, quietly. No announcements, just space. At work, I was fine. I hit deadlines, showed up on time, kept things light. No one there knew anything. I liked that. It was the only part of my life that hadn't gotten stained by all of it. But in quieter moments, especially at night, I kept running through conversations I never got to have. Things I wished I'd said to Teresa before it all blew up. I wanted to ask her how long she'd been planning it, whether she ever sat there with a pen in her hand, hesitating before signing my name, or if it came easy to her, if she believed, somewhere in her mind, that she deserved more than I did. And the part that stuck with me the most wasn't the money. It was that she'd looked me in the eye, for months, and let me believe we were still on the same side. That she was honoring what Grandma wanted, that we were both trying to do the right thing. I started seeing a therapist about a month after the settlement. I didn't plan to. It was a fluke. My primary care doctor recommended her after I came in for stress-related migraines. I almost canceled the first appointment, but I went. The first session, I just talked in circles. I told her the facts, the court stuff, the money, the forged signature. She nodded and asked simple questions. Nothing deep, nothing invasive. It helped. By the third session, she asked, "When did you stop trusting her?" I told her it wasn't one moment. It was small things. How Teresa took over the paperwork without asking, how she stopped sharing updates, how she acted like I was a distraction instead of a co-owner. But you didn't stop her. That part hit. Because it was true. I didn't want to get involved. I let her take control. I convinced myself that meant I didn't have a say, or that I shouldn't get in the way. But that's how it happened. Not in some dramatic criminal mastermind kind of way. Just in silence. In the space I gave her to do it. It didn't make it my fault, but it made it easier to understand why it had gone that far. Later that month, I got a letter in the mail. Not certified. Just regular postage, no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no closing. Just this. "You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it." No signature. But she didn't need one. I showed it to my therapist. She said I didn't have to respond, that I could treat it like a scratch on a wall. There, annoying, but not worth digging into. So I didn't respond. I folded it once and slid it into the back of a file drawer, behind old tax documents and expired insurance cards. Then I shut the drawer and left it there. I gave notice at my apartment at the beginning of June. There wasn't one reason. I just didn't want to stay there anymore. The note under the door, the nights I kept a flashlight next to my bed, the way I flinched whenever someone knocked. It had sunk into the walls. Even if I knew I was safe, it didn't feel like it. Not really. I found a condo on the east side of Vallejo, quiet street, upper unit. Nothing fancy, but it had a small balcony and good light in the mornings. I used part of the settlement to buy it outright. No mortgage, no debt, just mine. I didn't tell anyone. I moved on Wednesday with 2 hired guys and 6 months worth of boxed up tension. After they left, I sat on the carpet, eating cold Thai takeout out of a plastic container, and stared at the empty walls. It felt cleaner than my old place. Newer somehow, even though it wasn't. That first night I slept through until morning. No dreams, no anxiety jolting me awake at 3 a.m. I woke up with the sun on my face and didn't feel like I had to brace myself. It was the first real sign something inside me had shifted. A week later, Evan sent me an email. The DA had officially declined to prosecute Teresa. Insufficient public interest in restitution paid in full. That's how they put it. The civil case had checked the error boxes. No additional follow-up planned. I read the email twice, then closed it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised either. I didn't need her arrested. What I needed was already done. But I made one last decision. I wrote a letter to Teresa. I didn't send it. I just wrote it, printed it, and folded it once. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. I told her she changed something in me. Not because of what she took, but because of how quickly she did it. And how easily she justified it. I told her I trusted her more than anyone else in the family. I told her I wished I didn't know how far she could go. And then I wrote, "You lost me permanently. There's no fixing that. And there's nothing left to argue about." I put the letter in a sealed envelope, wrote her name on the front, and tucked it in the back of a drawer in the condo. I didn't want her to have it. I just wanted the words out of me. Over the next month, I began deleting things. Old voicemails, photos, screenshots of texts, notes I'd made to myself during the case. I even deleted the calendar events from the court filings, hearing dates, and lawyer calls. There was no reason to hold on to any of it anymore. The record existed somewhere, but it didn't need to live in my pocket. One night, I logged into the old family group chat, the one I'd muted during the legal mess. People were still posting birthday wishes and baby photos. No one had added me back into anything. No one had asked where I went. So I left the chat entirely. No announcement. Just gone. I didn't need a final scene. I didn't need the last word. The decision had already been made. The anniversary of the sale passed without me realizing it. I only noticed because I was sorting through my email and saw the original message from the realtor, Marissa. The subject line said, "Congrats on the closing." It was dated almost exactly a year ago. Clicked on it once, then closed it without reading. A year feels like a long time until you start remembering what you were doing during it. The calls, the court forms, the lawyer meetings, the waiting, so much waiting. And after all that, it was just over. The house, the case, the relationship, none of it could go back. I never heard from Teresa again. Not directly, not through anyone else either. No cards, no apology, no strange messages. It was like she deleted me from her life the same way I deleted her from mine. We lived in the same county, probably passed each other on the freeway without knowing it, but the space stayed quiet. The money sat in my account for months. At first, I didn't want to touch it. Then I made a list. Nothing dramatic, just things I'd put off. Dental work, a new laptop, paying off the last of my student loans. I bought a used car to replace the one I'd had since college. I gave a little to a shelter my grandmother used to volunteer at. Not out of guilt. It just felt like something I could do with a clean heart. The rest, I saved. It didn't fix anything, but it took pressure off. And after a year like that, not feeling pressure was something. My grandmother's birthday came in September. I lit a candle for her in my kitchen. I hadn't done that the year before. Back then, I was too angry, too wrapped up in the mess. This year, I just stood there for a few minutes, quiet, not sad, just still. She would have hated what happened, not because of the money, but because it split us. She was the kind of person who made people sit at the table until things were fixed. But this wasn't a dinner table problem. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. From both of us. I never told her I loved her the last time I saw her. I was tired, and it was late, and I said, "I'll come back tomorrow." She slipped while I was gone. The nurse found her first. I still think about that. If Teresa had asked, really asked, if we could sell the house and split it, I probably would have said yes. Not because I didn't care, but because I trusted her to handle it. That was the part that still stung, not what she took, what she used to take it, me. Now, when people talk about family and say things like blood is everything, I just nod and change the subject. I don't try to explain. Most people only learn differently when it happens to them. I don't tell this story much. Sometimes when someone talks about probate or siblings fighting over property, I feel the urge, but I usually keep it to myself, not out of shame, just because it's mine. And the lesson I got from it doesn't really fit in a conversation over drinks or dinner. It fits in quiet decisions, the kind you make without a show. I keep a copy of the original forged document in a folder, tucked away in a locked cabinet. Not because I think I'll need it, just as a reminder. What people are capable of, what I'm capable of surviving. I moved on, but I didn't forget.